Hello and welcome to episode 97 of the Life and Recovery podcast with me, John Loxley. I hope you're doing well out there. This episode of the podcast is with my friend Michael, who is somebody that I've met recently in Emotions Anonymous meetings. It was a great conversation and I hope you enjoy listening as much as I enjoyed speaking with Michael.
I've been in recovery for quite some time now, so I have a very different life now to what I did pre-recovery days, and I'm not really sure where this will go tonight, but I shall share my experience, strength and hope with yourself and with whoever may happen to listen to this in the future. And it's only my story. I can't tell you anybody else's story. It's just mine. It's the story of an alcoholic who, funnily enough, I was just talking to some family today. A cousin of mine had her grandson with her, and I know that there are concerns around him, and I was just in conversation with him saying, you know, when I was his age, I remember people talking about alcoholics and drug addicts, and I remember thinking, I'll never be an alcoholic. I know I'll never be an alcoholic. And I really meant that at that time. And here today, I'm quite comfortable, clearly quite comfortable to be talking the way I am about the fact that I am an alcoholic. My cousin actually said to her grandson, Michael used to be an alcoholic. And I said, Michael is an alcoholic. And it's really important for me that I keep that current. I'm not frightened of the word alcoholic. I'm really aware that there's still stigma around the word alcoholic, but that is not my problem today. I've actually got honest with myself, and I can be honest with other people about the fact that I'm an alcoholic, but not active in drinking today. So my story, I guess, began the day I hit the earth. I was born in Newcastle, and I'm the eldest of 3 kids. And growing up, I always thought that I was from the normal family. As an adult, and I look back, I can see that it perhaps wasn't as normal as I thought it was at the time, but I think that probably applies to most people because we only know our own surroundings. Although I maybe I'm wrong there. Some people may be well aware that their family life isn't normal, but I thought mine was, and I actually didn't realize how privileged a childhood I was having. There was a lot of money around in my family, and when I say there was a lot of money around, there was a lot of money, but we as kids didn't know that. I actually I felt more that my parents struggled. And I think it's the way they behaved with money. And if that doesn't make sense, I'll try and expand on that. I went to a private school, and every month I had to travel 30 miles by public transports, which was a bus and a train to get to school and a bus and a train to get back, and had to have a bus pass. And every month I would have to ask for the money for the bus pass, and it was a massive issue for me to ask, because of the response I got from my mother. Bloody money again, money going out. You think it grows on trees the way you lot go on. And, you know, they were paying for me to go to this school. And my dad was self-employed, and looking back now, wasn't skint at all. But I was really scared about asking for money for the bus pass. And if I needed stuff like for the gym, we had to have the school regulation gym stuff and rugby stuff and all of that. Hated rugby, but you had to have the really expensive rugby top. And I remember, and I'm talking about the 1980, late 70s. A rugby top was 30 quid. It was a hell of a lot of money then. It was equivalent of like 80 odd quid now. And we had to have the school one. So yeah, I used to hear my mother worrying about bills and worrying about money. And I grew up thinking it was normal to worry about bills and money. And lo and behold, when I got older, I used to worry about bills and worry about money. So I was at home until I was 17, and I had to share a room with my brother throughout my childhood. We had a 3-bedroomed house, and there was 3 kids, 2 lads and a girl. So me and my brother shared a room, and we really didn't get on at all. And when I was 17, I think from memory, he'd worn something of mine. It was a new pair of shoes that I'd saved up to get, and he'd ruined them. He'd gone through the fields and they were full of mud, and he'd just left them in the back. So there was a fight, and I didn't have a great relationship with my dad, and I remember my dad shouting at me, and I said, "Oh, stuff it, I'm out of here." And I left home, and I went to live in a flat with some guys from school. And I was still in full-time education, but living in this YMCA. And that's when I'd already started drinking, but because I'd been living at home, my drinking was sort of being monitored. But then I was like off the leash or off the rein, and I started going out partying in Newcastle, and that's where I'm from. And I think that's the first time I remember being late for school and giving up the Saturday job that I had, and I started to like go off the rails. I can't remember how long I stayed away, but I moved back after, I think, about 3 months. And it was because my father reluctantly agreed to put up a stud wall in our bedroom so that we could have separate bedrooms. It just happens that he was a house builder, and he could have done it years before, but had refused to do it. And we had been asked, but had refused. And so I did move back home, and I stayed back at home until I was post A-level. And then I went off to, I applied for a couple of jobs and didn't get them. I failed my A-levels, so I went to college for a year to resit, and I was in with the drinky crowd at the college and wasn't one bit interested in the coursework, and I failed the exams again. So then I decided that I was going abroad. And so off I went to Israel on a kibbutz. And, you know, when I got out to Israel, I remember people saying to me, "Oh, have you come to find yourself?" And I thought that was cool. And I said, "Yeah, I've come to find myself." Still finding myself today, but that's another story.
I don't know if you ever do.
Pardon?
I said, I don't know if you ever will.
I think I'm pretty damn sure I'm never going to properly find myself, and that's okay. But I did think I'd gone to find myself in Israel, and I was on this kibbutz for the best part of a year, and I had a great time. It was great fun, hard work, but really something I don't regret at all. What I didn't realize was that it was giving me the experience of not only being away from home, but living abroad and experiencing different cultures and all of that. And there was also a great social side to it. So every night we'd be drinking, and it was okay to have a hangover, but fortunately I didn't really get them. I was one of the lucky ones who could get up the next morning bright and breezy and get on with my job. So I came back to the UK, and actually I hitchhiked back. I went to Greece and I had no money, so I hitchhiked back home. And when I got back here, I had that bug that I wanted to be away again. So I got a job with a holiday company as a holiday rep in Spain, and went out there. And I don't think I'd shock anybody by saying that it's a party life. It certainly was. And once again, it was really hard work, and I took the work side very seriously. And I did really well. I mean, I'd go out party until 2, 3 in the morning. I'd be up for work at 9 o'clock, but we only did 9 months. And the 3 winter months were quieter. The summer months were really busy. But then you got 3 months off. So that was time to sort of just chill out and recover, really. But most people do 3 years max, and you're burnt out with it. And I did do the 3 years. But whilst I was there, I was liked. I did the job well. I got promoted, and I was in charge of about 10 people. So I was one of the team leaders. I don't think I was a very particularly pleasant leader. I was quite controlling of people, and I expected other people to meet my standards and didn't hesitate to put people down. And also I had favorites. I liked the people who would stand up for themselves, and I wasn't so good with the softies. And I think I gave them a really difficult time. But the drinking was then just starting to become problematic. Sometimes I'd miss work. I'd get away with it. People would cover your back. But after 3 years, I'd had enough, and I applied and was successful in getting in with one of the major airlines. I've missed a little bit out. I came back to the UK and decided that if I was going to apply for the airline job, I couldn't go back overseas. So I gave myself a year back here and applied for British Airways. And I remember there was 55,000 applicants for 500 jobs, and I got one. And I was over the moon. It was good money, and it was I didn't know anyone that did it really, but I'd heard that it was a good life. And I went off to London and did the training course for 2 months. And I remember in that training course, it really hit me one day when one of the trainers said, this can be the most sociable time of your life. It can be fantastic, but it can also be the loneliest job in the world. And I remember sitting in the training room thinking, God, I hope it doesn't turn out that way for me. And it did. It became a really, really lonely life. And it became a lonely life because my social life turned from being with other people to being with the bottle. So I would only do long haul flights. My nearest destination would be Boston, USA, and that would be 3 days there and back. So I'd go on day one, I'd arrive there day one, have an overnight stay, and leave on the night of day two and get back day three. That was the shortest time away. The longest time was 3 weeks. So I was constantly living out of a suitcase. And what I thought was the benefit of that job was, at the time, but was probably the beginning of the end for me as far as the career went. I would go to work and I wouldn't know anybody necessarily who I was working with for the next 3 days to 3 weeks, because there was 10,000 of us on long haul. So I would go away, party when I was away, do whatever I wanted when I was away, come back, and I would never see those people again. I might see one a month later, I might see one a year later. So then I understood what this lonely thing meant. Because, I'd give you an example. I would go to, I don't know, the States, and I might go out with some of the people from work, or I might go out by myself, and then I would be in the room by myself. And I never got off that plane without having my bag filled with alcohol. So quite often I would sit in the room watching CNN, just drinking by myself. I did that job for quite a few years, and I ended up once again. I did it well. I was, I never drank at work. I was always adhered to the no drink 8 hours before a flight, so that I was sober in my head. But the drinking when I was back home was scandalous. I mean, I was then starting to drink during the day. I was drinking in the morning. My reason was jet lag. I've been awake since 4 o'clock. I can have a drink at 8 o'clock. My life's different to most people. And then it was 12th of January, 1997. I was on a flight to Phoenix, Arizona, and I felt really ill. And I was in charge on this flight, and I said to the colleagues, I need to go and sit down. We were about an hour before we landed, and I went and sat down at the back of the plane, and the next thing I knew, the plane had landed and there was people around me, and I was being taken off the aircraft to hospital. And the reason I remember the date, it was my birthday, and I was in hospital in Phoenix, and they said, "You've had a seizure." And I thought, well, this will be the end of my job. I'm going to lose the job. So I was taken back to the UK as a passenger, and I didn't lose my job. I saw the doctor, and they said anyone can have a seizure. I had been attacked about a month before that, and they thought maybe there was a link there. Anyway, 3 months later, I had another seizure, and that was the end of the job, and I was retired off. And it was a big shock, because, I didn't really have any higher education qualifications, and the job that I thought I was secure in for the rest of my life had finished. And I got this check and a pension, and I decided that I was going to have one big party, and it was going to last for a year. And I had to move back I was living down south at this time. I moved back up north because I couldn't drive a car. And my drinking just went crazy. And it was 24/7. I had a few more seizures and I was hospitalized a couple of times. And amongst all this madness, I met a guy who lived in the south of England and went down to the south of England, relocated, did another geographical and moved in with him. And we stayed together for many years after that. But it was 3 years into that relationship that my other half decided this is going the wrong way totally. He was working full time. I was drinking full time. I wasn't working, couldn't work. I was having periods of being really, really ill where I could hardly drink. I was so ill, but I had to get the drink to make me feel or to normalize my body because I was suffering from DT so much. And I didn't understand or know very much about 12-step programs then, but my partner started going to what I now know to be Al-Anon. At the time, I just knew that he was going to a weekly support group to help him to deal with life, and part of that was not to drink so much. That's all he told me. And he used to get hell on earth from me every Thursday night when he was going to his meeting. I'd go on, meet your weirdo friends. And off he would go, and then he'd come back. And he'd been in this Al-Anon for about, 6 months, let's say. And he actually informed my family about what was happening at home. And he said, it's either, I think that we're going to have to split up because I can't deal with this anymore. And he spoke to my mother and she said to him, well, Andrew, am I all right using names on here?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Andrew, she said, really, there's not very much I can do if he doesn't want to stop. And I think she was very right. So the next morning, he told me, and my reaction was one of anger, rage. How dare you effing this, that, and the other. And he just stood his ground and he said, look, it's up to you. He said, something's going to have to change. And he said, do you want to speak to your mum and have a word with her? And I said, yeah, I will. I remember feeling like really hungover. And I picked the phone up and my mother straight away said, you do know Andrew rang me last night? And I said, yeah. She said, I can't do anything if you don't want help. And I said, I did. I said, I do want help. She said, would you like me to come down there? And I said, yeah, if you could. Come with me to the doctor. So while she came down that day, and while she was on her way on the train, I spoke to a friend of mine who had worked in drug and alcohol for years. And she said, you need a detox. Wherever you go, you do need a detox because you're having DTs and it's not safe for you to just stop. So cut a long story short, within 2 days, I think, I was in a residential rehab that had a detox facility. I've missed out a bit. Nobody knew, but for months, after he'd been going to Al-Anon, I did look up Alcoholics Anonymous, and I used to ring the helpline. And they used to ask me if I'd like to go to a meeting. And I said, no, I've just rang up to say hello. I don't want to go to any meetings. But I was obviously in that contemplation stage without even knowing it. So when this all happened and I was asked, do you want help? And I said yes. It felt like a massive relief, but it also felt as though I had let the cat out of the bag and there was no going back. And I felt really scared about that, because I thought, what if I really do want to drink again? Then I'm going to look as though I've failed, and people just say you're useless and everything. Anyway, I went off to this residential rehab, and I remember having 4 cans in the back of the car, and my mother was in the front with my ex-partner now, but he was driving the car. And I was drinking these beers, and I kept one hidden under the bag for when I got there for that night. Little did I know they were going to search everything and take it away. But I was having this can in the car, and I remember my mother, she's dead now, but she turned round and she went, "That might be the last drink you ever have." And I said, "Don't say that." The fear that rose in me when she said that, I went, "Don't say that." And I thought to myself, anyway, she's wrong, because I've got that one under there for later on. But like I've told you, that got found. And that was, touch wood, the last drink I've ever had. She passed away in 2010, so 11 years. She's been dead now. And the day I arrived there was the 31st. Has July got 31 days? 31st of July. I think it was the last day of July, 2002. 1st of August 2002 is my sobriety date. But 1st of August 2002, I had a huge seizure in that rehab. And they didn't allow me to start the treatment program because I was too unwell. And I think they were scared. Not scared, but they were concerned that if I went into a room and started being challenged on behaviours and all of that, it would be too much. So I was in the sickness ward, health ward, for about 4 days. And then I started on the treatment program, and I was there in total for a month. And when I left there, I had a one-to-one counsellor, and that counsellor just sat me down and said, "Look, you've done really well. We couldn't have asked any more of you. But it all starts now. This is when the real recovery starts. Treatment programs can do what they do, but we can't do the work for you. So get to as many meetings as you can. Find out who you identify with and get yourself a sponsor. Go through the steps, and there's no reason why you won't do all right. Don't do those things, and there's lots of reasons that you won't do all right." So it was really simple choice, and I really decided I was going to give this a go. So I hit the meetings big time. I did a meeting every day, and I used to miss out Sunday. It was my day off, but I would do 2 meetings on another day, so that I did 7 a week. And I was about 2 months in the meetings. Well, actually, my first meeting was probably the worst meeting I've ever been to. The first meeting out of rehab. I'd gone to a few in the residential, but I went to a meeting on my first day out, and it was awful. And there was one person there, me and him sat down, and he was really negative. And he said, "Welcome to the world of recovery. This is it, and it's crap," basically. But I realised later on that he wasn't doing too well himself, and hence there was nobody at the meeting apart from me. So I kept going, and I was 2 months sober, and I decided that I wanted to get a job. I mean, I really wanted to get a job a week in sobriety, but people were saying, just take it easy. You haven't worked for 3 years. And 2 months down the line, I got a part-time job in Marks and Spencer's, packing the shelves. I started there on bonfire night. I remember November the 5th.
My birthday.
And I worked, is it?
Yeah.
November the 5th, I started 2002. And I did the Christmas thing, and they kept a few of us on, and I was one of them. So my hours like went up then, and I didn't tell anyone that I was in recovery. I didn't feel strong enough to start going into all of that. I was concentrating on doing the job. It was 3 hours a day, 6:30 till 9:30 in the morning, and it gave me all day to do my meetings and do what I had to do. And I was becoming the good partner who, instead of lying pissed all day in the house, I was preparing dinner for my other half coming in, and all was great at the beginning. Anyway, within 4 months, I'd been put forward to go for this promotion. It was a new role within the organization, and I got this job, and I ended up being an area manager for Marks and Spencer's with the rollout of a new credit card. And I was doing this job, driving around the southeast of England and suit on and all of that. And it was a sales job, and I was really bad at it. And I was struggling. Anyway, one day I remember I was near Banbury, which is near Oxford, and I pulled into a parking lot place on my way to a sales meeting where I was coming bottom of the rank, bottom of the sales. And I rang somebody from AA, and I said, I'm in a terrible situation here. I feel awful. I want to run away. I want to die. I'm going to come last. I feel full of shame. And this person said, Jack, the job. And my ego said, how possibly could I do that? I am doing so well. And she said, put your recovery first, because you ain't going to have a job if you pick up. Anyway, I got to that sales meeting and I jacked the job. And I went back I didn't leave the company. I went back to packing the shelves, and I packed the shelves for the next 3 years. And in that time, I decided to go to university, and I did a foundation type thing for a degree, which I, many years down the line, completed as a degree. But I stayed in education for the next few years. And I hit the meetings big style. I continued with AA. My life got better. The further I got away from the last drink, good things started to happen. Some painful things happened as well. My relationship broke down after a few years. I was hurt, and I found it very difficult, but I didn't pick up a drink. It didn't cross my mind, actually. Many of the things that I predicted would be triggers to drink alcohol actually didn't materialize. I thought going on holiday would be a big problem. Going to a party and a wedding or a funeral would be a big problem. Dealing with death would be a big problem. I'm not saying there weren't problems, they weren't difficult, but they actually didn't make me want to drink. And I think the reason for that is that I've been to enough meetings and heard enough people who have decided to drink. And I've yet to hear somebody say that it's a better experience. Saying that, has there been times where I've thought of drinking? Yeah, there has. I've been on those holidays and seen people drinking and thought, God, that looks really nice. But I've also remembered this story that I'm telling and remembered where alcohol took me. And I'm sure there's some bits of the nasty, gory drinkalog that I've missed out. Well, of course there are. There's things come to my mind now, involvement with police and things like that. And I've missed out the drugs part as well, because there was, if there was drugs around, I would take them. Alcohol was my drug of choice, but I tried other things as well. And one of the worst experiences was in San Francisco, and I was in a bar with a stranger, and he offered me a line, and I took the line, and about an hour later I said to him, "This is cutting my throat big style." And he said, "Sure, it's crystal." And I didn't even know what crystal meth was until then. By God, did I know about it the next day when I was coming down off it. It was hell on earth. And it was really difficult working on a plane for 10 hours. And I could bloody see mice coming out from under the seats and everything. It was a nightmare. So anyway, I've digressed there. I'm back into my recovery, and I'm years down the line and doing AA and well involved. I mean, I've always had some sort of involvement with service. My first service job actually was quite a responsible one. I was the literature secretary after about being 6 months sober, and I was nominated to do that, and I enjoyed it. I was on the helpline the first couple of years, or after a year. I think you had to be a year sober to be on it, or 2. And I've always had some sort of service position. Anyway, I mentioned that we split up, Andrew and I moved back again to the Northeast. And that's when I was involved with opening a new fellowship in the UK, which was Emotions Anonymous. And it was all on the back of somebody at work saying, "I would love to be able to go to a 12-step meeting, but I'm not an addict." And I had a friend who lived in America who was in EA. So I contacted her and got some of the literature, and we started Emotions Anonymous in Sunderland, which is actually where I live now. That meeting eventually moved to Newcastle because 2 small meetings became one, and we've been going for about 11 years, or maybe more now, 12, I think. 2009, I think it started, EA. So I keep my hand in with Alcoholics Anonymous, and I do Emotions Anonymous. My life is good. I have everything that I need. Sometimes my head tells me that I want more, but I don't necessarily need more. I've certainly got everything that I need today. I have a God in my life. I've never even said the word God up till now. And when I came into the program, I was quite anti-religion. And a lot of people who don't come to the 12-step program, I find, use religion as the reason that they don't come. And I was very anti-religious. However, people in the rooms told me this is not a religious program, it's a spiritual program. And at first I was a bit suspicious of that, because a lot of people said it. And I thought, well, if it's not religious, why do they keep saying it's not religious? It's like somebody saying, "I'm not going to tell you a lie," but you know that they're going to tell you a lie.
It's not a cult, honestly. It's not a cult.
It's not a cult. So I was thinking, maybe it is, and this is the way that they just say it. However, for anybody that might be considering 12-step or is new in it, I can guarantee you that had it been religious, I wouldn't have stayed. The difference today, though, with me, and this has nothing to do well, it is to do with AA, but it's not what AA is about. My view on religion and other people has totally changed. And I totally respect that people have religious beliefs. I personally don't, but I do have my belief in the God of my understanding. And when I say that, the paradoxical thing is that I don't really understand my God, but I know I do believe and have faith in something bigger than me. And when I direct my energy and ask for help or support or guidance or just care from my higher power, I get it. When I don't ask and when I don't connect, and that's usually due to me being lazy, then I find that things start going a bit squiffy. And yeah, so my attitude, I think, has changed towards religion. That's probably the better word. And I do. Sorry,
I was just going to say I was exactly the same, and I liked what you said there, like, because I'm the same as you. Well, no, yeah, I am the same as you in the sense of I obviously don't know what God is, or the word just doesn't really work for me. So like when we use higher power, that works much better for me personally. Mm-hmm. And despite not being religious, I don't have any issue with people who are religious and that that are on their own kind of journey. But the thing that I kind of go back to now is like in the literature of the 12-step fellowships where it says God is either everything or he is nothing. And not that I think he's a it or it is a he, but that's kind of what I always go back to. I just think, well, it's just everything, and everything's far bigger than me. that's it. I don't really think about it any more than that now.
Yes, I mean, I was brought up with very religious parents. When I say very religious, they were churchgoers, and my mother went to church every single day. So, which is quite unusual for UK.
Yeah, that is pretty religious.
Yeah. Well, she was, and I mean, she was lovely, and she had a lot of friends and a lot of respect, and she wasn't a weirdo with her religion. She never tried to throw religion on other people. She just said it was important that she had her connection. And I think one of the things, the gifts that my parents gave me was when they were both dying, they had faith and they weren't fearful of death. And they talked to me about it because they had the opportunity to talk about the fact that they were going to die. Fortunately, I had sobriety and I was adult enough to be able to talk about that with them. And it's one of the most precious times that I had with my father, because him and I did not have a good relationship, but we talked about death, and he trusted me with that conversation. And it was something that he brought in Alcoholics Anonymous into that conversation, because I said to him, Dad, if I hadn't stopped drinking, I may not have been here to have this conversation. And he said, that AA that you go to, it's magical. Just keep going. And I hear a lot of people in AA saying, keep coming back, keep coming back. But to get your father, or to have your father who you've not got on with all your life, saying that's magical, just keep going, it meant so much. Because on the back of that, he said to me, I'm really proud of you. And he'd never told me he was proud of me. So yeah, to see them have their faith with their religion, it just blew me away. because death was something that I was scared of, and I'm not scared of it today. And I'm sure that that experience with them has helped me with my fears of death. So, yeah, I mean, that's just one example of things that have changed. Many things have changed in my life. You know, I'm single today, and I think part of me would like to be in a relationship, but relationships are extremely difficult for me in recovery. And I don't know if it's because I'm just difficult to live with. I don't know if I find other people difficult to live with. I'm not really sure. I have had a couple of relationships since the big one that I split up, but they haven't become anything. And also, being a gay man, it's quite easy not to have relationships, but you can have sex with people. I think it's easier than the heterosexual world.
Definitely.
It's sort of like, pardon?
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like a given. It's like, it's just, there's no expectation for a relationship and all that baggage that comes with having sex.
I lived when I was at university. I lived with a gay man, and there was about 6 of us in the house, and he was having more sex than anybody in the house, 100%. And it was just because, you know, like back then they had like the apps, like, you know, Grindr, you know, way before Tinder and these apps, where it's probably much easier now. I mean, obviously I'm in a relationship and a monogamous relationship, so I've never been involved with all that stuff. But definitely, I you know, speaking to him and other gay friends that I've had like over the years, that they've all said that, yeah.
But I've got to be careful with that as well, because that can become an obsession and an addiction in itself, and it doesn't make me feel good after. I'm not good after like a one night stand if I really like somebody.
Yeah.
Because I can't deal with that. Oh yeah, it was great, but move on. I'm after the next one. And there's a lot of that stuff goes on now. And the other thing that I find, and this is just me living in the north of England, attending fellowship meetings, and a person who has lived in the south and attended lots of fellowship meetings, the percentage of LGBT people in the meetings is very low.
Yeah, it is.
And when I go out with friends on the scene, which is very rare these days, the percentage of problematic drinkers is really high. Yeah. So, and I know this from back in the day when I was in rehab. The boss of the rehab was a gay man, and he talked about that then, and nothing's really changed.
No, there's a massive disparity with minority groups as well, isn't there? Such as, like, you know, Black, Asian,
yeah.
And I think, actually, you and I have spoken about this before, haven't we? I think it's I think we agreed that it's kind of very much to do with the fact that historically the 12-step fellowships have been kind of primarily white middle class men, you know, and it's kind of, obviously that's changed a lot now, especially over the last kind of 10 years. But I just think that, you know, I think people that are from the LGBT community and people that are from other kind of groups, they just feel different. They just don't feel comfortable sharing like the stuff that we share in those meetings, and a lot of it's massively cultural. Like, I had there's a local meeting here. There was an Asian lady who Indian born and lived in this country for many years, and, you know, has an Indian husband, and she was just like, you know, the shame of coming here and talking to my family about it was horrendous in the beginning. Like, and she said like now they're kind of on board and they see, you know, how fantastic it's been for me and stuff. But yeah, I think there's just more shame attached to it, I believe.
Well, I mean, I am related to people who are from the traveling community, and it's the same again. And it's, you know, it's a well-known, not talked about fact that there is people with drug problems, alcohol problems in the gypsy and traveller community, and they don't attend any of the meetings that I go to.
No.
And, you know, it was actually something I've just remembered. In my first year, I came up to Newcastle from the south where I was living. I was going to meetings all the time down there, came up to see family and accessed the meetings in Newcastle. And a friend of mine, who's still a very good friend today, and she did this from a caring place, but her suggestion was that I didn't mention that I was gay in the meeting, because some of the old timers might not like it and they might say something that would upset me. And I didn't mention it, but what I did do was talk about it as people I trusted in recovery down south when I got back home. And they said that, I mean, they were horrified that I'd been told this, but they said, if ever you have anyone in the fellowship who gives you a hard time for being who you are, they have not got a program in their lives, and they're not working the program if they have got one. And that gave me some sort of confidence. That gave me, I felt very held by that information, because I must admit, when my friend said that to me, I didn't say anything, but I felt I was back in that place of being in the closet, being frightened of the outside world. And I was suddenly in that world, in the 12-step program, and that was wrong.
Yeah.
It was the wrong advice, actually.
Yeah.
Well, it's, but I mean,
it's total, like, that's the beautiful thing, isn't it, about the fellowships, is obviously you get the odd person that, you know, that doesn't have a program or doesn't adhere to the values that we all subscribe to, but it's just acceptance, isn't it? Acceptance of people, no matter what their sexuality, their color, their religion.
Absolutely.
And that's what I love about it personally.
And I agree with you, and I think it just reinforces, it certainly reinforced to me my responsibility in the meetings with regards to being open-minded and also to being perceptive to the newcomer, because that newcomer, you know, may well think that I'm sure most newcomers think, oh, I wonder if it'll be all right if I say this or if I can say that. And I think it's really important that the newcomer is given some sort of time and support, that extra time and support, because I've been in meetings before where somebody has been new and has not been addressed, and I've been in the meeting where I have missed the newcomer and it's come out during the meeting that they're new. Not often, but it has happened. And you know, I just think it's well, actually, I've been to a meeting where nobody knew me, and I've just walked in and nobody's asked me if I know anything about the fellowship. And I thought I could have been a newcomer in here.
Yeah.
And you know what? I wouldn't have come back.
I've had that experience too, and a number of places. And that's how you can tell the difference between a well meeting and an unwell meeting, isn't it? I mean, like,
absolutely,
the meetings are there for the newcomers, for God's sake. So if they're not picking up the newcomers, then there's something massively wrong. And that's, you know, that's one of the things that I really, really love about Emotions Anonymous, because straight from the very beginning, I felt really welcome, and it was like, I was like, this is even warmer than I've experienced in any other 12-step fellowships, and I've you know, I've been in a few, and yeah, just, and I also feel another thing that's fantastic about EA as well is that you can talk about anything. Like there's certain things in certain fellowships that you feel you can't discuss, you know. And I mean, like over the last few years, you know, I've talked a lot on the podcast about my struggles with food and
Yeah.
you know, specifically sugar, and I bring it up all the time in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. But I feel as though certain people in the meetings, even though everybody in the room is resonating, you know, and because I've been around for so many years, I don't really care what people think, to be honest with you. I just share what I share. But I do get the feeling that some people kind of think, oh, you know, why is he sharing about that? Or, you know, I've shared about like, you know, addictions to sex or addictions to, you know, other behaviors and drugs, you know, for example, in meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of get this impression that, well, this is Alcoholics Anonymous and you shouldn't be sharing about that. I just think that, you know, come on. I mean, like we're all addicts. That's what we are. Like at the bare bones of it is that, you know, we're either using alcohol or drugs or any other type of behavior to simply medicate ourselves. Like that's just what we're doing, you know. And when I came to EA for the first time, it was like, hallelujah, I've come to a fellowship where I'm talking about the actual problem. And the problem is the fact that I'm powerless over my emotions and that my life can become unmanageable as a result of that, you know, and the mental health issues that come as a result of my emotions. And I'm medicating it with all these different things. And I was like, I just feel really comfortable being able to talk about what's actually going on for me. Was that kind of your intention with the meetings, you know?
What do you mean? Was that my intention with
You know, like
EA?
you know, when you set up the meetings in Sunderland, was your intention?
No,
No.
no, wasn't my intention. I think it's just that it has evolved to being that way. I think it's been led by example. Everyone has just always welcomed everybody. And we've talked about the importance of the newcomer. Yeah, everyone in EA as well as AA knows about the importance of the newcomer. I would like to say that, like to claim, perhaps rightly or wrongly, that EA hasn't missed out on a newcomer walking in.
Especially with Zoom, you can't miss them.
No, that's true. I mean, that's one of the phenomenons of this Zoom thing that I don't think anyone foresaw. Just something that came to mind, you know, I was talking about when I got clean and sober, I thought my life would become really dull and boring, and it certainly hasn't. It's become the opposite of that. But one of the things I was scared of was to go on holiday. And anyone who knows me knows in normal times when there's no restrictions, I'm forever away somewhere. I love traveling. It's in my blood. I said that I'm related to the traveling community. Well, I think I'm certainly one of the world's travelers. But I decided to go on this all gay cruise when I was, I think, about 10 years sober. And I was going with a friend from AA. And I knew, sadly, he's passed away now, but him and I went on this cruise from Barcelona, and it was with, I think, 3,000 gay men, and there was 2 lesbians on the ship. Poor buggers. But anyway, they were on the ship with us lot. And we wondered if there'd be a Friends of Bill meeting. And there was. And on the first day, we went down and there was one guy turned up. And this is 3,000 people, mostly Americans. And this guy said, are you here for the knitting class? And I went, what? He said, are you here for the knitting class? And Bobby, my mate from Glasgow, went, he's fucking winding you up, man. And he said, is it the Friends of Bill? And he says, yeah, the guys are coming down now. Do you know there was about 70 people at the meeting?
Wow.
And it was really fantastic. We had 2 meetings a day. There was all sorts going on that ship. You can imagine the drinking, but there was drugs on there. Without a doubt, you can spot what's going on. And the lovely thing is, in the parties and all of that, you just had to see somebody from the fellowship and they'd give you a wink or, "Are you all right, Michael?" And I just felt safe. I was all right. And if I wanted to be away, I'd just walk away and go back to the cabin. But yeah, brilliant. So, I mean, that's one thing. I make sure that there's always a meeting somewhere nearby where I'm going, just so that I've got that to fall back on. And today, sometimes I don't need to have a meeting on holiday. But if I do need one, I know where it is. Yeah. I'll give you an example of now. I'm hoping to go to Barcelona in September, and I'm going by myself. I'm staying in a hotel in the center of the city. And I don't know the times of the meetings, but I know where the meetings are. And I'll go to them when I'm there because I'm by myself. If I've been with other people, I may go, I may not. But yeah, I've got that freedom today, and life's good.
What does life in recovery mean to you then overall?
Life in recovery to me means being able to appreciate what I've got, being able to be grateful for what I've got, and being there for other people as well. I couldn't be anywhere for anybody else before recovery. And today I enjoy being able to help other people if I can. And also being less selfish. Because I think I heard somebody saying today, their self-awareness has become so much more enhanced since being in recovery. I didn't realize just how wrapped up in myself I was. And today I am more self-aware, and I would like to think less selfish. And there are times where I can be selfish, even today. But you know what? That self-awareness tells me this ain't right and it doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah.
So I do something about it.
Beautiful. And what was the one piece of advice that you give to anybody that might be struggling or thinking about making a change?
My advice to anyone who's struggling would be, where you are, it's okay to be struggling, even though it doesn't feel okay, because without struggling, you ain't going to get to that better place, but the better place is there waiting for you. And the way to get there is to tell somebody about how you're feeling and ask them for some help. Because once you do that, there's all the help in the world. And just by admitting it to yourself and to somebody else, it opens the gate for all of that. Do you remember I said about that feeling, if I drank again, everybody would think, oh, he's failed and all of that. I think it's really important that I have so much time for people that relapse. And I think people who relapse and admit it are such strong people to admit the relapse. Because I don't know if I relapsed, if I'd have that strength. And I'm fascinated to hear the story of the people that relapsed and what happened. And I don't believe it's set in stone that the relapse happened 3 weeks before and all that. I'm not one of these that does the textbook thing. I think it's individual for everyone. And yes, people usually have gone off program before the relapse. Otherwise, if they're on program, usually they don't. But yeah, I think if anyone is struggling, and let's face it, there are people in recovery who are struggling. It's about, I think just try to be as honest as you can about what's going on, and you might get to the bottom of what the struggle is, because unless you can identify the struggle, you can't fix it. And it can be fixed. Most things can be fixed. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And I will see you again on a meeting soon.
I certainly will.
Thanks for listening, and if you've been affected by any of the issues discussed in the podcast, please see a range of mutual aid organisations in the show notes. Peace and love, and goodbye for now.